I don't believe you're born with entrepreneurial DNA. I think the entrepreneurial DNA is a result of all the failures you've experienced.
And now, it's time once again for the show that gives glorious voice to 25 million business owners across the fruited plain. Radio Free Enterprise with Frank Felker.
Hello, hello, hello. Yes, indeed, I am Frank Felker. Welcome back to Radio Free Enterprise. You know, I try to talk about a lot of different things on Radio Free Enterprise, and one of the things I talk about is the difference between a growth business and a lifestyle business. And a lifestyle business is sort of your typical mom and pop, doctor, lawyer, candlestick maker, local restaurant runner, people who make a great living from their business, but are not the kind of business that you would necessarily see on Shark Tank or on CNBC. They're raising millions of dollars in venture capital and trying to be the next Uber or what have you. There's a very important distinction between those two types of businesses. The founders of those businesses have a lot of common challenges that they share. And I often say that my target audience, the people out there listening, are the founders, the leaders of founder-led companies. So that could be a growth business or a lifestyle business. Today, I want to bring you the founder of a growth business. And another interesting aspect of what he's doing is the viral nature of the marketing that he's doing. The way that I found out about his platform, I'll describe here shortly. But I just think there's a lot of great lessons that today's guest can bring to all of us, no matter what type of business we're running. So I want to welcome Michael Cheng, founder of Snipley, to Radio Free Enterprise.
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for having me, Frank.
Thank you for being here today, Michael. Let's take off right out of the gate with, it occurred to me that trying to describe Snipley in an audio format is kind of like trying to describe a color or a smell. It's like, well, it's kind of like this. But anyway, I imagine you've had to do this as a founder of a growth company. What is your elevator speech explanation of Snipley?
Yes, of course. And at the beginning, it was especially difficult. Like you describe, it's like a color that they've never seen or a smell that they've never experienced. And so it was one of my greatest challenges in how to explain simply because it's so visual. And you have to see it. Once you see it, you get it. But the way I explain it is businesses share content all the time. If you think about the past 10 links you've read, it's probably on social media. But brands and businesses don't share links for fun. They share it for a very specific purpose, to spread their brand awareness, but ultimately to drive a conversion. And so what Snipley empowers brands and businesses to do is to add that conversion opportunity, a call to action, and include it into the links that they share, so that even as you're sharing links from The Verge or Vox, you can still include a piece of your own branding in that link, and also a call to action to direct your visitors to do what you want them to do.
Well, let me give you an example. I think that's an excellent explanation, and obviously you've had a lot of time to craft that message.
Yes.
But just to explain to listeners who still may not be exactly tracking with what you're saying, I'm Facebook friends with a person named David Doost, and David shared a piece of content that I thought was really fascinating. So what he did was he dropped a URL from an article onto a post on Facebook. So there was the headline of the article, which got my attention. There was David's little 2 or 3 word reason why he found it interesting. There was the featured graphic from the article, from the website, wherever the article was found. And there was the first, whatever it is, 150 characters from the article. I looked at all of that and I said, yeah, that's interesting to me. And David's a smart guy. I'm always interested in things that he shares. I'll click on that link. Clicked on the link, up pops the article. Let's just say it was on the Washington Post. And I noticed, though, immediately that at the bottom of the page, here's a little banner with David Doost's face and a little message from David that said, if you'd like to learn more about whatever it was, and it was a call to action that was congruent with the piece of content, the message of the content that he had shared. There was a button that said, click here. And then I did click here and I was taken to one of David's web properties. So this is how Snipley works. And this is what Michael was describing, is that we as individuals or as business owners share content to be a thought leader, but we also, the ultimate objective is to drive conversions. So did that do a decent job of giving sort of a case study of what you're doing?
Yeah, that's a fantastic use case, and we see it all the time. And it's really about giving credit to the person who shared it, and also acknowledging and recognizing who sent you to that valuable piece of content. And it's also from the sharing perspective, it's an opportunity to customize the reading experience, custom tailored to your own audience. It's your message that's being shown to people who follow you. So it's very interesting in that respect as well.
It really is, and I'm really just starting to learn about it. I've got so many questions to ask you, but let's go to the next sort of question begging to be asked, which is, where did this idea come from, Michael?
Yeah, so it's obviously not a eureka moment. You know, many things happen that tied to ultimately the idea of Snipley. But if I could try and do my best to pinpoint a eureka moment, it was when somebody asked me what was my return on investment for all the time I spend on social media. So for previous businesses that I've been involved with, I spent a lot of time, especially sharing content, curating content on social media. And of course, I get likes, retweets, followers. But at the end of the day, what is the tangible return on investment? If I spend 8 hours getting 7 followers and 9 likes, what does that mean for my business? It's very difficult to translate that intangible social metric into something that I can use on, say, a spreadsheet. And so Snipley is all about creating that solid conversion opportunity. And in order for that to happen, there needs to be a conversion opportunity. So a call to action of some sort, a measurable conversion needs to occur on the page. So Snipley is all about including that opportunity so that I can say, okay, I spent 8 hours curating content and I got 3 click-throughs on my call to action, which landed on my page. And one of them ultimately purchased my product. So that's where the idea came from. It's the question of what is the return on investment with social media? What is the return on investment on content curation? And Snipley is all about answering that question and helping people find the answer to that question.
Well, I was going to ask this question later in the interview, but it just leads right out of what you were just saying. What sort of metrics and analytics does Snipley offer to people so they can see what type of benefits and results they're getting?
Yeah, so on the very basic level, there's clicks and conversions and conversion rates. So that refers to how many people are clicking on the links you're sharing, how many people are engaging with the call to action that you include inside the link, and what is the ratio between those numbers. And that gives you a really good sense of how effective the content you're sharing is and how effective your value proposition is. I've seen businesses with as high as 40% conversion rate to as low as 0.4% conversion rate. So it's all about experimentation. Just like if you're writing a Google ad, you know, you have a very limited amount of characters. How do you capture the attention and imagination of people such that they would engage with your call to action? And so those are some of the key metrics, is clicks and conversions. And then beyond that, there's a lot of interesting analytics that you don't normally get. Let's say you share an article to Washington Post. You know how many clicks you get, but you don't know how long they stay on the page, how many pages they visit after they click through your link. So you could be sharing a BuzzFeed article, for example, and they could get 1 million links, but you don't know the bounce rate. If the bounce rate is 99.99%, then you're not actually delivering value. The fact that you got 1 million clicks is actually misleading to the quality of content that you're sharing. But with Snipley, you actually get metrics such as when I share a content, when I send somebody to an article, how long are they spending on that article? How many pages are they reading after they click through on my link? So there's analytics there that lets you refine your content sharing strategy as well.
It's just tremendous. I spent a lot of time. You sent me the link to your YouTube channel, and I was quite taken with the fact that all of the YouTube videos were none of them, at least that I saw as I started from the top and got about 10 deep, were produced by Snipley, but rather they were all produced by users who were like, hey, I got to show you this cool new thing I just found. And what I really got from that was 2 different things. One is there are a lot of different ways to derive value. There was a video about how to drive more traffic to your blog, how to drive more traffic to your podcast. I saw a guy who's using Snipley to try to help build his downline in a multi-level marketing business. Just all types of things. And the other part of it is that I saw each person's, if you will, take on it, what their perspective was on it. What is this thing, Snipley, and how they tried to put a name on it. And so it just sort of helped me sort of triangulate and synthesize what my thought was about what Snipley was. But let's keep moving along. But I could really talk to you about this for a very, very long time. With the what I was just talking about, all the different people that are using it. And I imagine that back at Snipley HQ, you get to see all the 40,000 foot metrics and all the different use cases. Tell us about a couple of the coolest or most interesting uses you've seen for this.
Yeah, my favorite is Greenpeace, and Greenpeace has been one of our biggest users from the beginning. But, we built this product primarily with business and brands in mind. And so when I first saw nonprofits using Snipley, it was very interesting because the call to action is towards a cause. And I remember very clearly the first link I saw was Greenpeace shares an article that was about, I think, whales. They were not being treated fairly. There was a number of issues with wildlife that they represent. But this one in particular was about whales. And there was a call to action from Greenpeace using Snipley that says, sign this petition, right? So it's very clear you're reading a content about the extinction of whales and how they're being mistreated and all the problems that are going on in the world that are threatening the livelihood of whales. And there's a direct call to action from Greenpeace that says, sign this petition to help us further the cause. And it was so powerful. And I remember the call to action, the conversion rate on that call to action was well over 50%. And it was amazing. And it just spoke so clearly to me that when paired with the right content and the right call to action, there's a real value that can be created. Because when you're reading an article as a reader, oftentimes you want to take action. But publications aren't going to spend the time to plaster call to actions on the page. You're going to have to maybe Google a foundation that represents whales and then find their petition and sign it. So even if you want to take action, oftentimes it's not that easy. And so what Greenpeace has done is using Snipley, they've made it really easy to take action on the spot after you've read about a cause you care about. And so since then, a lot of nonprofits have used Snipley, and to this day, it's still one of my favorite and highest converting call to actions when it comes to use cases.
I love that. That is such a great example. Everything you say brings to mind about 10 more questions. Let me ask you something. We talked about the metrics a moment ago and how, bounce rate and a lot of things that you see, let's say with Google Analytics or other types of analytics. Once somebody comes, let's say I'm Greenpeace and I say, click this button to sign the petition. What do my internal analytics tell me? Do they tell me that this visitor came from Snipley or they came from the Washington Post or wherever that article was?
You have both of those information. So if you're familiar with Google Analytics, you have UTM tags. And so the UTM tags actually includes both of those information. So the Snipley link includes where the link is. So if it's Washington Post, the Snipley link once unfolded would actually look something like snip.ly/abcd ? WashingtonPost.com/articles.
Okay.
And so the URL includes both pieces of those information. So you can very easily segment your analytics such that it completely ignores Snipley, for example, and you can just see where traffic is coming from normally, or you can filter specifically, I want to know how many clicks or views are coming from Snipley specifically, or any combinations of those.
What about if I wanted to know which one of my Snipley messages was working the best? Because there are so many different variables. I can change, the call to action, what the button says. I can change the coloring of it. I can change what the graphic is. I guess you've got a lot of different things, but there's a lot of things I could change in terms of the look and feel and functionality of the Snipley bar or whatever you want to refer to it as. Can I track that?
So technically you could do that in Google Analytics, but for really Snipley Analytics, I recommend using our dashboard, which would have everything you need, because our dashboard includes A/B testing features that allows you to test different colors, different buttons, different messaging, and it displays all of those analytics separately so that you can optimize and make those decisions. And really, as a marketing tool, that's all we're about, is empowering users to experiment with different marketing messages and see what works better and be able to increase their conversion rates over time. So the analytics is really a tool to help them improve the analytics. And everything is available in the Snipley dashboard. But of course, you can do that in Google Analytics as well, but our dashboard is built specifically to help you measure those things.
Well, I don't want to get too deeply into the arcane with this because many listeners may have already tuned out as we started talking about analytics too much. So let me say another thing that I think is important, which is just pure branding. When I click on this thing, and let's use the David Doost example I was talking about before, I then associate David, his name, his face, everything, with that content and with the headline and with the graphics that are on that page, because they're literally being presented all together to my eyes as I see it. And so whether or not I click on his call to action, there's still a branding benefit to the person who uses Snipley.
That's right.
Okay, blah, blah, blah. I usually try to go in a very linear fashion with my questions, but my brain is just on fire with all this. Okay, now here's one thing I was interested to see as I was watching all the different videos, and is that Snipley is so effective that it's actually in some circles a little bit controversial. Mm-hmm. And I thought, they often say if you're not upsetting somebody, you're not doing anything important. So would you like to speak to that at all, as far as some content publishers feeling like they're getting the short end of the stick somehow?
Oh, yeah, of course. And Snipley was a debated topic from the very beginning. There's people of both sides who like it, hate it. And of course, everything we talked about, being able to add call to actions on content that you share. Of course, for the person who publishes the content, how do they feel about that? Well, they're very divided into two camps. There are people who don't like call to actions appearing on the page because they see it as their property. They don't like the additional traffic. And we actually make it extremely easy to opt out. All you have to do is just submit a request and your site is opted out. And so,
oh, really?
It's not
so when you say that, that means if I were to try to share a link to a particular site that had opted out, it wouldn't work.
Right. And that's our stance as a team. We're not here to build a product and force it down people's throats. It's really what we believe is that when you incentivize people to share, when you give other people a piece of the real estate, they're much more likely to share your content because they also benefit from sharing links from your articles, which means that if you write really good content, I am now heavily incentivized to share the things that you write, because not only do I drive traffic to your content, I also get brand awareness, and some conversions could trickle back to me as well. And so the other camp are publishers who love Snipley because they see a real value in incentivized sharing, that people are much more likely to share more content, share their content, because the value is now aligned. Before, as a content sharer, I'm not really incentivized to share content. Not really. And I don't really benefit from driving a lot of clicks to your website or your blog. And so a lot of publishers love Snipley for that. The opportunity to align themselves in terms of value proposition, be able to drive conversions together. And so there's that side. But yes, we make it very easy to opt out for anyone who's uncomfortable with what we do.
That is just fantastic, Michael. I really have to congratulate you for your clarity of thought about that and understanding, getting everyone's incentives and motivation in alignment. And for people who just don't get it, well, here's your button to opt out. Sorry, we couldn't get along. We can agree to disagree.
One thing I want to make very clear, though, is that we use all canonical URLs and flow-through settings, which means all the SEO juice goes directly back to the original publisher. It doesn't interrupt with any of the advertising revenue. So even if I share a link to your page and it's a Snipley link from me, you still have all your ad revenues, all the impression that happens on your page, all the click-throughs. Wow. Everything is still yours. And so everything we do is really to keep in mind always that there's a delicate balance between the reader and the reader side is why we have, elegantly designed call to action. It's not pop up. It's not in your face. It's not wait 5 seconds to click through, because the reader experience is important. It has to be subtle yet effective. The writer experience, the publisher experience, that's the side where you get all the SEO, you get all the ad revenue. It's not about taking that away from the publishers. And then, of course, the sharers. The sharer gets the brand awareness and the call to action opportunity. So looking at that from the big picture and being able to balance those three very major parts of the content ecosystem is our priority at Snipley.
Great. Well done. Well done, my friend.
Thank you.
Okay, now, how I got started using Snipley is your built-in, viral nature. David is using your free version, which includes a little, Snipley logo. And I assumed, and correctly, that if I clicked on that little logo, I was going to find out more and find out how I could do what David was doing. Right. So, and it worked like crazy. And for example, here in this particular case, I then, after registering it, I guess you had an autoresponder sequence that dripped a few emails out on me. And one of them said, What can I do to help you understand and more better engage with Snipley? And that's when I responded to your email, and one of the results was this interview.
Right.
But it struck me as what a tremendously easy viral marketing system this was. Are you doing anything beyond the viral marketing, or is that sufficient to grow at the rate and scale that you'd like?
Yeah, the built-in virality is a big part of how we've grown, but it's definitely not the only thing that we do. One of the things we realized very early on is that Snipley is a tool of imagination. As in, we as the product builders can't go out and tell people how it's supposed to be used. Surely because just from observing, we learn so much. And we're always constantly surprised by the ingenuity of how people use Snipley. So we knew from the get-go that it's about fostering the community. It's about what you saw on the YouTube playlist. It's about getting people to produce content, produce guest posts, blog posts, podcasts like this, because it's about extracting the individual's idea of what Snipley is and getting them to share that with their network that we find most effective. There's an entire community that are real estate agents who use Snipley to generate leads, because that's one of their biggest challenges. But I'm not a realtor, and it'd be very difficult for me to ever teach anyone how to use Snipley in a real estate setting. But that's why we foster those communities and engage with the blogging communities and podcasts and have other people educate others on what their idea of Snipley is and what they can do. And I actually would argue that part is more or less responsible for getting Snipley to all these different verticals, all these different markets. And even with built-in virality, if you don't follow somebody, if you don't follow a real estate agent, for example, no matter how viral it is, you're never going to see that person's Snipley link. So I think built-in virality helps us extend within a market, but it's engaging the community and podcasts and bloggers that help us diverge into other markets.
That's great. Very wise. I really applaud you for that. You clearly have very high, what I call EIQ, entrepreneurial IQ. I liken it to emotional intelligence, that some people just innately understand things like I have a degree in economics, and incentives and all of this type of thing are central to microeconomic theory. And it seems as though these types of things just appear to you very clearly and naturally as part of your DNA. So I want to, with the time we have left here, transition a little bit away from Snipley in particular and into your entrepreneurial experience in general. And as a tangent point, I wanted to ask you about the funding that Snipley, how you're funding Snipley right now.
So Snipley has been self-funded, not self-funded as in I put money in it, but self-funded as in that it's been a profitable venture very early on.
That's awesome.
And I think there's a lot of entrepreneurs out there that thinks funding is the only way to go. It's definitely not so. In fact, if you're profitable, it's much easier to secure funding.
Oh, of course. It's like any banks are much more ready to loan money to somebody who doesn't need it.
Yes. And so we as a team decided very early on that if we can't make money, then there's no point in raising money. So we really focused all our efforts on proving whether or not people are willing to pay for it, building features that, freemium model, being very, very particular with what we build and how can each feature prove whether or not this product is worth paying for. And so at the very beginning, it was much cheaper. We're charging something like $5 a month just to prove that it's worth something. And so, of course, that's changed a lot since then.
Now, would you say that you followed the lean startup method?
I think so. I mean, lean startup is very broad, but the way I see it is if you move fast, and I think moving fast is crucial for startups, then you fall under the camp of lean. And so I think moving fast is one of the most important things, not just for the startup's health, but also personally as an entrepreneur. Time is of the essence, and being able to prove business ideas within a few months rather than a few years could make a significant difference.
Well, one thing in particular I'm thinking of is like the minimum viable product concept. Were you ready to release something that wasn't perfect, but was at least functional and was sufficient to create learning opportunities for you?
Right. And so the lean startup movement says that the first thing you launch, you should be embarrassed. You should almost be borderline ashamed of what you're putting out in the market. And that was definitely true. And I'm proud to say that to this day, that's still true. You know, when we release features, it's not ready. It's almost borderline not ready. But the insights we get is what helps us shape it in the right direction. Because if you go too far towards perfection, you never know if you've gone in the wrong direction from the beginning. And so we definitely deploy the MVP mentality in everything we do, not just in the very beginning, but even now as we deploy new features.
That's great. Well, we're running short on time, and there were some other things I wanted to ask you about. Can you quickly go over your previous entrepreneurial experience, just
Yes,
a thumbnail
course.
version?
You know, and we talked about entrepreneurial DNA earlier, and I don't believe you're born with entrepreneurial DNA. I think the entrepreneurial DNA is a result of all the failures you've experienced during your various attempts at entrepreneurship. So for me, I've started many businesses ever since I was really young. You know, you talked about lifestyle and growth businesses. I've been in both of those situations, have found success and failures. One example I could think of was, you know, I started off as a freelance web designer and just building websites, just like many contractors, and I actually expanded that into a lifestyle business when I hired other web designers to help me build those websites, and eventually turned that into a growth business because I introduced basically a SaaS model to web design, allowing small businesses to pay a monthly fee to sustain a website. And so I've been through these various transitions and learned different things, of course, made a tremendous amount of mistakes. And I always very heavily highlight many, many failures. And I think that's a part of what helps me make the decisions that I do today, is that I would look at a situation and I'd say, oh, yeah, I encountered a similar situation. That was the decision that I made, and it was wrong. And so I think experience is very important.
Yes. We could talk about the DNA, the nature versus nurture for another 5
Yes.
hours. I would only say in response that some people have a greater affinity and
Yeah.
talent that they bring to it than others. But people, including myself, after years and decades of experience, finally start to figure things out if they just stick with it.
It's a combination for sure.
Yeah. One last thing before we go. And, I want to say something very quickly. I am going to create a short overview video of how I see Snipley for listeners of Radio Free Enterprise, and that you'll be able to access just by registering with the site. And I will send you a link to that video. So I wanted to put that in there. When people ask me about how to raise money for a venture firm, I was a CEO of a .com company 15 years ago during the .com era. The number one thing I tell them is don't do it. Don't talk to venture capitalists. Don't talk to investment bankers. They're just going to make your life miserable. What would you say in a nutshell to somebody who asked you a similar question?
Yeah, I think by far one of the most common mistakes I see is people approach the conversation with what they benefit from the funding. But that's not what it's about. It's how your startup can benefit the VC's portfolio. At the end of the day, they're not here to do charity work. They're looking at your startup as an investment opportunity. And the conversation needs to be framed in that way. It's how does your startup fit into their portfolio? How does the growth of your startup increase their likelihood of raising their round from their investors so that they can continue to exist as a VC firm? Because I think oftentimes people forget that VC firms don't have unlimited money. VC partners work really hard with investor relations to make sure that their fund stays alive. And so oftentimes you really have to question, are you the right fit for their portfolio? And is your growth rate actually going to benefit the firm, their investment firm? And I think viewing the relationship in that way actually makes a big difference. And I could go on hours talking about that, but I think that's the summary version of what I like to communicate in terms of first-time entrepreneurs pitching VCs.
That's great advice. Look at it from, in effect, your customer's perspective.
Yes.
Why would they want to buy you?
Right.
Well, as everything else you shared with us today, Michael, that is just great stuff. I can't thank you enough for being here today on Radio Free Enterprise.
Thank you, Frank. It was an absolute pleasure.
Expanding your consciousness with tales of brave Ulysses, Radio Free Enterprise.